There's been a ton of discourse generated by the most recent Andor arc, and I say that in a really positive way. The show is heavy, it gives us a lot to think about, so I wanted to go a little bit deeper into two aspects which I covered in my review but I think deserve more time. Now, the first was generated from a Twitter post I saw. As always, I'm hesitant to do this. Don't go respond to this person after you've seen this video, whether you agree or disagree really. That, for me, is a little too close to brigading, but the topic is so interesting. So, the user said there was absolutely no reason to militarily occupy Gorman. It's one of the dumbest things Palpatine could have done. The Gormans were happy with their planet and its industry. The Empire simply could have mined the material and left the Gormans alone. Why would they bring this kind of negative attention for no reason? There's an obvious answer to this one, so the user continues saying Palpatine doesn't need the Gormans to cooperate. There's 800,000 people on the entire planet. The Senate backs him whatever he does. So kill them even though they would just die with the planet anyway. Also, the rest of the galaxy goes against you. The writers of Andor should have thought of something better to get the galaxy to rise up. I actually completely disagree with almost everything said here. I think the genocide on Gorman is one of the most well thought out story aspects I've seen in Star Wars for a long time. First of all, we'll dispense with the obvious. When it comes to why they couldn't simply mine Gorman, well, the Imperials cover this in their meeting. The mining of the material is extremely invasive. You can imagine, for example, that it's within the planet's core, and the procedure is very likely to destabilize the entire planet or to otherwise make life impossible. That's simple. You can't mine around the Gorman people because this process is extremely destructive. It'll destroy the planet. So why not just do it anyway? Well, we have to remember, Palpatine didn't just ascend to the role of Emperor and get the support of the entire galaxy. Now, certainly at this point, 16 years or so after the founding of the Empire, he's got a lot of sycophants, he's got a lot of people who do support him, systems, senators, but Palpatine's control on facts, the government, the galaxy is not absolute. In fact, we know specifically that Palpatine sees the Death Star itself, which, funny enough, this mining operation is helping to produce, as key to grabbing full and absolute control. That's why, as we see in A New Hope, Palpatine only finally disbands the Imperial Senate after the Death Star is up and running and ready for its big demonstration. The Imperial officer even says to Vader when boarding Leia's ship,
"Holding her is dangerous. Word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate."
Then, later with Tarkin, Leia rightfully points out that the more the Empire grips, the more systems will slip through their fingers. But there's an even better point to counter this. The Empire can't simply get away with whatever they want because the Senate is not the only method through which people can, let me choose my words here, rebel. Control of the media and the narrative surrounding the Gorman massacre was meant for the galaxy at large. I'll come back to this in just a second, but every atrocity the Empire commits is another banner to be waved by groups like the Rebellion. And in that sense, Palpatine arguably wasn't careful enough, because the Gorman massacre finally forced Mon Mothma's hand. Her defecting to the Rebel Alliance certainly caused volunteers to join alongside her. It raised the profile of the Alliance across the galaxy. And the massacre itself also probably just increased Rebel sentiment, as certainly did the destruction of Alderaan. Palpatine arguably didn't care enough about what the little guy thought. Still, the Gorman plan makes sense because of Palpatine's almost total control of the media. For the past several years, the Empire has been manufacturing galaxy-wide consent for a genocide. That's why they say things like the Gorman people have incompatible views with the Empire, or they reject the Empire, or they do all these acts of violent rebellion, only a fraction of which are true. The Empire has flooded people's minds for, it appears based on the conversation, quite a while with negative information about the Gorman people. And so the act of a violent attack on poor, new, young Imperial recruits, well, I think the galaxy believes it. Someone in my Twitter comments said it well. The Empire doesn't just want plausible deniability, they want support. Palpatine, with an active Death Star, would have done things differently, but this is the stage he was in. And we also have to remember, even with the propaganda, Gorman was a rich, mid-rim, influential planet. We're not talking like a Tatooine or even a Ryloth. Anyway, I appreciate the user for generating an interesting discussion. I also did just want to talk a little bit about the character of Syril Karn. I mentioned some of this in my review, but the more I think about Syril, the more I love his character arc. I want to be clear. Is Syril a hero? Certainly not. Syril also, however, is not Grand Moff Tarkin. I think the most tragic aspect of Syril's short life is the fact that there exists a universe or a system in which he could have been a good person. Unlike Dedra, or certainly Krennic, individuals who are motivated largely, if not totally, by their own personal ambitions, Syril is motivated by an attempt to do good. Now, that's not an excuse for some of the bad things he does, because people do awful things while attempting to be good all the time, but there's a difference in believing in Imperial law and order as Syril does, because he sees it as a way to create a safe galaxy, versus someone like Krennic who sees an authoritarian regime as a way to grab for themselves individual power. That doesn't excuse Syril. He was always a bit of an authoritarian. However, we also know that he's been radicalized in his own way. We have to remember the show starts off with Cassian killing 2 people. Now, those cops were assholes. They very likely harassed other people the same way they harassed Cassian, but as far as Syril knows, 2 of his colleagues were murdered in cold blood. Then, when he finds the person who does it, he's put in charge of a squad and suffers a very traumatic defeat, which sees the death of several men under his command. We see him essentially shell-shocked as he was at the Gorman massacre at the end of episode 3, one of my favorite episode endings of the entire series. Again, you can't excuse him, but it's not as simple as saying Syril's evil and leaving it at that. There's a lot of nuance to the character, which is why I think he is so brilliant. And he truly does care when he sees what's happening. Dedra cares a little bit, but not enough to stop it. She goes with the classic, if it's not me, it's someone else. Syril really does care. What the Empire is doing here violates his ethical devotion to law and order. This, the other half of authoritarianism, the cruelty for cruelty's sake or for individual power that he wasn't aware of. He should have been, but he wasn't. You can imagine how, as an adolescent in the Empire and with his mother, that in his own way, he was a victim to forces that shaped his mind in this way. And at the end of it all, when he's killed, it's right after hearing from Cassian that he doesn't know who he is. He's become a cog in a terrible, terrible machine. And as he dies, he realizes his life has had no purpose except to facilitate a terrible, terrible crime. Either way, I really enjoy the character. Those are just some of my further thoughts on the most recent block of episodes. Man, they were hard to watch. They really were. I've been thinking a lot, and to me, once they started singing in their native Gorman language, man, that was hard to watch. I mean, they walk into a situation where they know no one is leaving. The last thing they do is sing in their native tongue. What can you say? Anyway, those are my thoughts. I look forward to reading your comments.